What's the point of philosophy? Why should you ask yourself philosophical questions?
The question is the answer. I can explain this best with Wittgenstein. He had already asked himself this question in his book, Philosophical Investigations, and he has an answer.
It may easily look as if every doubt merely revealed a gap in the foundations, so that secure understanding is possible only if we first doubt everything that can be doubted, and then remove all these doubts.
So I doubt what he just said.
That's very good. You shouldn't just take everything for granted. Wittgenstein expresses it better.
What is your aim in philosophy? To show the fly the way out of the fly bottle.
Well, I don't understand. What does he mean by that?
The glass is our language. It's our cage. We run up against it without seeing it. But Wittgenstein has hope. There is a way out of the bottle. So philosophy is not meaningless.
But how do I get out of the bottle?
First, we have to recognize the glass, the limits of language.
The limits of language? Is that something to do with censorship?
No, you can easily recognize censorship because it is a prohibition. Wittgenstein means the limit that we can't see so easily. It is a limit of our thoughts and not a prohibition by someone. The problem is that we express our thinking in language, so the limit is not in front of us, it is within us. It is our thinking.
We want to understand something that is already in plain view, for this is what we seem, in some sense, not to understand. Something that one knows when nobody asks one, but no longer knows when one is asked to explain it, is something that has to be called to mind.
I feel like I understand something, but explain it to me again.
Take a word like freedom, play, or justice. Of course you understand and can use all these terms, but try to explain them, and above all, to define them. You will soon realize that it is not that easy. It may even be impossible. This leaves us with a paradox. How can we use words whose meaning we are not sure of? We can take these words and integrate them into a discourse that makes sense. We create meaningful sentences, but we don't really know what they mean. Wittgenstein points out another problem. Concepts refer not only to things we can see and experience, but also to everything that is possible.
Our investigation is directed not towards phenomena, but rather, as one might say, towards the possibilities of phenomena. Our inquiry is therefore a grammatical one. One can think what is not the case.
Well, the main problem is that we don't seem to have a precise idea of what the terms in our language actually mean. I'm not sure if grammar can help.
Many terms represent ideas that we can't explain precisely, even when we think we have explained them.
The ideal, as we conceive of it, is unshakable. You can't step outside it. You must always turn back. There is no outside. Outside you cannot breathe. How come? The idea is like a pair of glasses on our nose through which we see whatever we look at. It never occurs to us to take them off.
Isn't this a problem for logic? Doesn't truth come from an objective perspective?
Yes, because logic assumes that there is a truth that is not part of the facts being described. In other words, there are facts and then there's truth, to which the facts refer. Truth and facts are related, and the facts are given a truth value. So, if you cannot look at something from the outside, you cannot assign a truth value to it. Logical description is not possible. But Wittgenstein goes further. He thinks that not only logic is meaningless, but also any interpretation that tries to explain the world.
And we may not advance any kind of theory. There must not be anything hypothetical in our considerations.
But to explain the world is the task of philosophy.
Wittgenstein thinks that philosophy should be practiced in a different way.
All explanation must disappear, and description alone must take its place. Philosophy is a struggle against the bewitchment of our understanding by the resources of our language.
Philosophy should no longer explain or interpret, but only describe. Language is then not the means of philosophy, but its object. Wittgenstein criticizes above all the core concepts of philosophy.
When philosophers use a word knowledge, being, object, I, proposition, sentence, name, and try to grasp the essence of the thing, One must always ask oneself, is the word ever actually used in this way in the language in which it is at home? What we do is to bring words back from their metaphysical to their everyday use.
But philosophy is not an everyday matter. Philosophers are more careful with language than in everyday life. They try to use terms precisely.
But it is precisely this care that Wittgenstein criticizes. What are these terms supposed to refer to if there's no external perspective? Wittgenstein formulates this somewhat more radically, but I also think more clearly.
The results of philosophy are the discovery of some piece of plain nonsense and the bumps that the understanding has got by running up against the limits of language.
That hurts.
The consequence is that philosophers have to deal with language differently. They have to come down from the ivory tower and accept that they cannot control language. Language is their cage, and at the same time, the object of their inquiry.
So, what can we do?
First of all, we should question the premises of our thinking. We cannot simply take concepts and then derive a theory from them. The problem is the concepts that are at the foundations of any theory.
A philosophical problem has the form, I don't know my way about.
Okay, I can say that about myself.
Philosophy must not interfere in any way with the actual use of language, so it can, in the end, only describe it, for it cannot justify it either. It leaves everything as it is.
But what can philosophy do?
It can describe basically nothing more than what the natural sciences do anyway. If it succeeds in describing the world correctly, philosophy becomes a hard science. Wittgenstein calls for a radical new beginning for philosophy. Up to now, philosophy has mainly been about interpretation and theories based on concepts and ideas that cannot be further derived. It is assumed that the philosopher already has a correct description of the world. But therein lies the problem. Of course, reality is not without contradictions, and the question is how to deal with that.
You can try to resolve the contradictions.
But is that the right way to do it?
It is not the business of philosophy to resolve a contradiction by means of a mathematical or logico-mathematical discovery.
When philosophy tries to set up a theory based on certain rules, these rules become the actual problem.
Here, the fundamental fact is that we lay down rules, a technique, for playing a game, and that then, when we follow the rules, things don't turn out as we had assumed, so that we are, as it were, entangled in our own rules. This entanglement in our rules is what we want to understand, that is, to survey.
We are trapped like a fly in a bottle. Its glass is our language, and we create theories based on language. We see the wrong way out of the bottle because we can't see the glass, and then we keep bumping into the glass, which represents our language.
It throws light on our concept of meaning something, for in those cases, things turn out otherwise than we had meant, foreseen. That is just what we say when, for example, a contradiction appears. That's not the way I meant it.
But how can we explain then anything at all?
Wittgenstein proposes a different way of what philosophy should be, what the task of philosophy is.
Philosophy just puts everything before us, and neither explains nor deduces anything. Since everything lies open to view, there is nothing to explain. For whatever may be hidden is of no interest to us. The name philosophy might also be given to what is possible before all new discoveries and inventions.
Philosophy is then a meta-theory. It describes the presuppositions of thought and action.
The difficulty is that we can't make any assumptions. We have to leave language as it is. We must not give a term a meaning that is supposed to serve as an explanation. In short, we have to describe.
Well, I think that will certainly lead to discussions.
If someone were to advance theses in philosophy, it would never be possible to debate them, because everyone would agree to them.
But how does it work? It's always the case that everyone has their own theory.
That's why you can't put theory before language. You can't change the meaning of words so that they fit your theory. You have to accept the words as they are.
When I talk about language, word, sentence, etc., I must speak the language of every day.
In everyday life, communication is also possible without questioning the other person's language. The language used every day doesn't need any explanation, but this is exactly where things get tricky.
The aspects of things that are most important for us are hidden because of their simplicity and familiarity. One is unable to notice something because it is always before one's eyes. The real foundations of their inquiry do not strike people at all, unless that fact has at some time struck them.
Wow, what's the best way to deal with everyday conversation? I understand everyday language, but I'm curious to understand what it's based on and what conditions it's a result of.
Actually, Wittgenstein doesn't suggest a precise method, but he gives a hint.
We can avoid unfairness or vacuity in our assertions only by presenting the model as what it is, as an object of comparison, as a sort of yardstick, not as a preconception to which reality must correspond. The dogmatism into which we fall so easily in doing philosophy.
It is important not to fall into dogmatism and assert what cannot be justified. This is possible when language and its words are not set as absolutes. Instead, they stand for a relationship. The terms denote the context, and it is this relation that gives a term its meaning.
A main source of our failure to understand is that we don't have an overview of the use of our words.
To do this, philosophy has to closely observe everyday life. Philosophy has to work with examples to show how the terms are related.
Don't you get completely different results depending on the examples you use?
A main cause of philosophical diseases. A one-sided diet. One nourishes one's thinking with only one kind of example.
Of course, the philosopher cannot just use a few examples that fit well with his ideas. He must be open and always find new examples. Philosophers must learn to describe.
I can't think of an example of anyone who has ever done that.
So, there's still a lot to do.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and see you next time.